So the reason for the thumbnail is that there are a lot of Bitcoiners that will judge me for what I'm getting ready to show you guys. And I totally understand that. But as I will outline in the conversation, I think that there are some really, really solid reasons why, even if whether you're a hardcore Bitcoiner or you're more of a TradFi person that's pursuing like financial independence, for example, talking about and pursuing these Bitcoin covered call ETFs like BTCI are really going to be a great bridge, I think, between our two communities. So today I want to talk about and go through the details of how the BTCI covered call paid me $890.38 for the month of October Bitcoin dividends. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the numbers first, and then I'll talk through a little bit about, okay, what's this covered call ETF? But for those of you guys that want me to cut to the chase, so I have 3 different buckets inside of my Fidelity account. And so I, just a couple of weeks ago, actually, went through, I think less than 2 weeks ago, I went through and took some of the funds in our taxable brokerage account and my rollover IRA and our HSA, and I bought some shares of BTCI, the BTCI covered call ETF. So in our brokerage account, I I sold off some shares of, I want to say it was Grayscale that I've had for years when they did the split, and then Fidelity Roller. So basically I sold some assets inside of those buckets so that I could then buy some shares because I want to do this as an experiment. So I basically was able in total to buy, right around a little, like just under 700 shares. Now, in my Fidelity Rollover IRA and our HSA, what I have those set up to do, instead of paying a dividend in cash, I'm just rolling those over and buying more shares from those profits. So these are the amounts, obviously in the taxable brokerage account, because we want to get to a place where we're starting to earn income off of, some of our Bitcoin investing. We got $232.24 off of 187 shares, and that is, settles in cash. And then in our rollover IRA, $431.34, which we rolled back into, we used to purchase an additional 7.6 shares. And then the same thing with the Fidelity HSA. We got a dividend of $226, and we reinvested that and got an additional, basically 4 shares. So I'll come back to these numbers once I've given you a little bit more context, and that will kind of maybe help solidify some of this. So this kind of speaks to an overarching strategy that I think, my wife and I and a lot of us in the Bitcoin and FIRE communities are trying to figure out, like, okay, this whole Bitcoin thing, like, how do we work this into our personal finances? So there are basically sort of like 3 buckets that, I use to think about this. So there are kind of like 3 areas that have exposure to Bitcoin. So there's our Bitcoin HODL stack. For those of you that are new to Bitcoin, that stands for hold on for dear life. And so in that, owning on-chain Bitcoin in cold storage allows you to, experience the capital appreciation of Bitcoin and really help grow the network, grow the movement, sort of spread the word, grow the monetary network. And again, we're daily cost or dollar cost averaging into cold storage. Then we have, I've talked about this in some recent videos, and I'll leave some links in the description below about the Fold card and the Gemini card and how we're using those 2 resources together to stack a lot of free sats and really kind of integrate Bitcoin into our daily and monthly personal finance stack. So the Fold card, again, it's kind of like a Bitcoin checking account. So you have you can kind of think of it that way. You basically have a routing number and an account number. You can buy Bitcoin in there. There are lots of ways that you can stack free sats. Like you can spin the wheel. You can buy gift cards. You can actually do dollar cost averaging there. You can do it anywhere from as low as like $5 a day in Bitcoin. You can also do roundup. So there's a lot of features in the Fold card, debit card stack that are very familiar to you if you have like a high yield checking account or a rewards checking account or something like that. Additionally, we use the Gemini MasterCard because some of the categories you can get upwards of 3 to 4% cash back in those. And then the way that you double stack with the Gemini MasterCard is that you basically you pay off the balance. We pay off the balance every week with the Fold card, with our Fold card checking account, and then we get rewarded sats for that as well. So it's a way to kind of double dip for free sats as cash back. Now, this third approach is something that I've recently, I found out about it really mostly from Brian Harrington, who has a great YouTube channel. I'd totally recommend that you follow him because he's very much pursuing this this strategy as well. We wanted to, kind of take our HODL stack, and how we're trying to build this daily personal finance stack, and then figure out a way to get some monthly income. And in sort of altcoin terms, you could kind of think of this almost as staking. So what we're doing is we're using the Bitcoin, the BTCI covered call ETF. And like I just outlined a minute ago, we've got a Fidelity brokerage account, IRA, and an HSA that we're doing that inside of. So a lot of people are not familiar with what a covered call ETF is. So a covered call ETF is an exchange traded fund that generates income by selling call options on the stocks that it holds. This strategy allows investors to earn additional income while still having exposure to the underlying stocks, although it may limit potential gain if the stock price rises significantly. So that's kind of like an overview. And I'll do more videos in the future explaining the machinations of how this works as I'm starting to understand it better myself. But basically, this is the NEOS BTCI Bitcoin High Income Covered Call ETF. As you can see, the distribution rate is really, really high. These are some of the assets, or net assets, gross expense ratio. Some of those things. You can see this on their website. And then these have been the payouts thus far. So the inception was actually last year. I think it was like a year ago, October of 2024. But you can see basically what they're paying out in this covered call ETF is. Like in January, it was $1.57 per share. So you get basically a payout per share that you own. And so I'll share a little bit more about, kind of how we're thinking about this, particularly in our taxable brokerage account, because that's really where we want to generate monthly income that we can use for, to integrate into our daily personal finance. So this last month, it was a little bit lower at 1.2999, but they have all the information about, what's in the fund, how it works, on their website. And I really also like that the CEO goes around and does videos on YouTube, and he does interviews and stuff like that. So super, super helpful. I think that this is a great strategy. I alluded to this a few minutes ago. Number one, for TradFi, traditional finance fire adherence. So people that are in the personal finance space, I know there are a lot of Gen X YouTube channels that I see that I see them put out great content, but it's all traditional finance, like Vanguard Total Stock Market Index, just kind of the traditional stuff that TradFi fire adherence kind of adhere to. So I think that this, and integrating a covered call ETF like BTCI, it's great for TradFi fire adherence because it increases cash flow from traditional ETF flow allocation. So you can see on this ETF, like the percentage payout is much higher, so I don't have, a ton of capital in it, and the payout is actually really, really good. And then and then the other thing about that is it gets you into Bitcoin. So you now have some skin in the game. You've got an asset that has exposure to Bitcoin. So the hope is that you'll start to read about it, learn about it, understand it, so that ultimately you become, a hodler as well, or a Bitcoin saver as well. And then for Bitcoiners, I think it kind of gives us both, the natural capital appreciation as Bitcoin, just continues to eat the world. The money printer is getting ready to be turned on again, and they're never going to be able to turn it off. And so those of us that own hard assets like Bitcoin and gold and silver, Bitcoin being the apex predator, I think, we are going to be the beneficiaries of that natural capital appreciation. Plus, with this covered call strategy, we're going to get a monthly dividend income cash flow for our real lives, instead of just like, I'm just, I'm hodling, I'm just waiting for someday where, it's at $1 million and then I feel comfortable borrowing against it or selling some of it and paying capital gains on it. It's giving you more of that immediate. And part of the reason that I say, Bitcoiners are going to judge this is that, there are some very, very hard line, this is, for the benefit of the more traditional FIRE people in the audience. There are a lot of Bitcoin, enthusiasts, and I would include myself in this, that are really trying to usher in Bitcoin as the new monetary system. And I'm just as fanatical about that as most of them are, but I'm also not closed off to, we still live in a fiat system. And so the more ways that we can figure out how to make our lives better in the here and now, I don't see a problem with that. So that's why I say Bitcoiners are probably going to judge me for this, but hopefully they'll come around. Some of the more hardliners will come around as well. So again, payout October 2025 is, taxable brokerage, rollover IRA, and HSA, all in my Fidelity account. And so not bad for the first month. I don't know that I'll double down on this, but I'm definitely my plan is to purchase more shares. So I'll keep you posted on that. If you guys are interested in getting into, if you're like new to Bitcoin or you're a Bitcoiner that wants to start monetizing or getting more free sats for purchases that you're making in fiat every day, I have links in the description below for the Fold card and the Gemini MasterCard. Great resources, and I'll be continuing to do some trainings on how, we're using that. So thanks, and see you in the next video.